Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Hello and welcome to In the Zone. I'm your special guest host, Edward Preston. Today's topic, whistleblowers, in America specifically. Of course, the producer is here with me of the show, Eric Shine, and we're going to get into this topic and a whole lot more as to why it is that this is important as a checks and balance in America. Eric, what has been the specific situations in America that has brought us to this point that whistleblowers are so significant that they should be acknowledged and given a place in America and the protection that they so rightly deserve?
But they were. I mean, if you think about the Constitution and what whistleblowing really is, it's complaining. It's like Martin Luther back in, was it 1500s or so, with the church, posting his grievances on the door of the church. We enshrined it in our Constitution and in our Bill of Rights so that the people, because we have no sovereigns here, we are all sovereigns, so that the people could file complaints and seek redress and actually find redress within a civil institution or process known as our courts or even arbitration and other programs. And you can look to people like Sybil Edmonds, which is more contemporary today. She's a whistleblower who has come out on national security issues, and they have gagged her, put a gag order on her. There's other people like Daniel Ellsberg, who came out with the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War. Many people consider him to be a traitor. I consider him to be a hero, and I think a lot of other people do, unless you're a member of this modern day or even past war party that not only wants to drive us deep into Iran, and that's something that seems to be, hitting the headlines right now, even within the next couple of weeks, and it looks like there may be, an attack. But others like Scott Ritter, who tried to stop the what's gone on, and he's been outspoken about there were no weapons of mass destruction. He was in there as a weapons inspector, and he's come out and complained. He's written books. He's tried to get out to the public and tell them what is going on, what's really going on. Others, you can go all the way back to our revolutionary time period, people like Paul Revere. He was a quote-unquote whistleblower or sounding the alarm, because that's really what it is, and it comes to some extent, the term whistleblower is like, the canary in the coal mine, to where the canary is there as an alarm back in the day when they used to keep them in the, now we have much more sophisticated devices, but the canary would sound the alarm to the miners, or they would find it dead within the cage, and they would know, look, we got to get out of here. And what's happened is that now any and all complaints are seen as frivolous by big corporations and big government who are working together to stifle the complaints of the citizens, not only of the United States, but of the world.
Well, to simplify for the common person, for them to understand that whistleblowing is basically anybody who makes a complaint that's reporting on any individual that they feel may not be doing the proper thing, that may be exposing people to harm, or
themselves,
or perhaps perpetrating fraud or some kind of criminal or negligence or anything. It doesn't have to be the quote-unquote whistleblowers that you hear about that are covered on mainstream media that have a title given to them or bestowed upon them by mainstream media. All of us are whistleblowers or have been whistleblowers at one point or another in our lives. And so the significance of us really rallying and understanding that it is important as a necessary part of the checks and balances of American society to preserve the quality of life, that we have to support individuals that have been exposed to the inside information that have brought them to the point where they're saying, you know what, there's something wrong and it has to be made right.
Well, and going even from Martin Luther and others, our founding fathers saw that it was so important to be able to, we had grievances against, you know, quote unquote, Mother England, you know, the stamp tax, all the other taxes that came out at that time. We were being taxed without representation, taxation without representation. And King George III would not listen to the grievances of the people here in the quote unquote colonies. And it got to the point where they would not only not listen to them, but of course, if they can't listen to them, they cannot redress those grievances. And we find ourselves in a very almost identical or you know, I don't want to say a metaphorical, but an identical position to where we were with King George, to where whether it's on issues of, I don't want to say mad cow disease, but anything, whether it's in the beef industry, whether it's in the steel industry, whether it's in any of our industries where individuals and employees are supposed to be able to file grievances, complaints about either an individual or a failure of process or procedure, and seek correction and redress without actually being attacked. But much like, and you can go back to even Christ's time, they used to literally nail people to the cross. If you complained about the government, if you complained about religion, whether it be the Pharisees or Sadducees or, you know, at that time there was no Holy Roman See in Rome, but, you know, if you complained about the Roman Empire, they would come after and literally, you know, to do away with the complaints, they would do away with the complainant. You kill the
messenger.
Exactly, to kill the message. And the very same thing is going on now on a wide-scale program where people like Negroponte, who was in charge of, he was
John Negroponte.
Yes, he was he was most recently made head of the 11 or 13 intel services in this Uber directorship of sorts, or a, you know, they're calling these positions czars, and you wonder where that came from Russia. And a lot
Caesar.
Right.
Czar
right,
Caesar,
exactly,
actually.
right. Well, and a lot of this is actually very analogous to what went on not only in the Soviet Union before it fell, but the Weimar Republic before it fell and turned into Nazi Germany, and you know, the military police state arose. You can see that there's people coming out from across the board throughout all industries at all levels, high and low, because if you complain, you're a whistleblower. If you file a grievance, you're a whistleblower. If you, whether it's verbal or written, if you carry a sign in an anti-war protest, you're a whistleblower, you're complaining, you're a dissident. And what's happened is that this administration, and even several before it, have taken on the position that any and all grievances, whether they be actual civil complaints in state court or federal district court, within the executive branch, or even to hearings before Congress, let alone actual complaints in the judiciary, are all somehow frivolous. They don't want to hear our complaints. They don't want to hear about from all the people in Katrina. They don't want to hear about all the war veterans. We've got, you know, one incident here where a specialist, his name is Town, and this was covered in The Nation magazine. It was written by Joshua Kors, it's K-O-R-S, and it goes into, and I'll just read these first two paragraphs, but it goes into much of the things that are going on within the military. Walter Reed, you know, one scandal after another, and part of the problem is those with the knowledge or information, like even these 8 U.S. attorneys, they're going after the individuals to destroy the institutional knowledge by destroying the individual who has that knowledge and is willing to step forward to protect the public and the public interest or commonwealth, so that the private interests may rule the day. And
well,
real quick,
before you get into that, then, Walter Reed is the Veterans Hospital, but another thing is how they destroy the individual is by mental, emotional, physical, financial, by any means. In many cases, people don't see it happen, but it's tearing up the individual from the inside.
well, and to the point where the CIA, NSA, FBI, and other federal departments and agencies are well practiced at this, and they do it for these list of, you can call them royal families, self-appointed royal families, these families who have been, you know, well protected, well provided for a very long time, and they've basically discarded the other 99% of the people. They feel that they are royals of sorts, but it's just simply amazing that they don't understand that what is going on right now, if not corrected, and our democratic institutions like our vote, which, that is a way of blowing the whistle, is who you vote for. I don't like this. You vote for somebody else and you try to change the system. But our court system and even due processes to whether it's arbitration or any other forms, they're all being shut down, fortified, and grievance or complainants or whistleblowers are being attacked to the point, like you said, they use programs like MKUltra, COINTELPRO, gang stalking, and more, so as to not only injure the individual, but to literally impoverish them. I mean, 50% of the individuals who are on the street now as homeless are veterans. And many of them are from not only the first Gulf War, and we've got 320,000. It just was on House, the TV show, the other night. They actually covered in the show and talked about depleted uranium. That is huge because it's starting to get into the, and I hate to use the term mainstream, but the corporate media, the corporate shows and programs that you see on the main channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, and cable.
They can deny it no longer.
Well, because the populist movement, the people are so angry with what is going on because they're treating us like somehow like 99% of the people that are out here are trash.
Expendable.
Exactly. And that our entitlements, and you have to understand what entitlements are rights by law. And George Bush has come out and said that, we need to do away with entitlements, that we need to do away with rights by law, protections. And they're bringing in, and one reason they have the open border policy and some of the other stuff that's going on, and that's a very complex issue, but they're using that as a weapon, not only to attack the middle class, but to bring in replacement, citizens to some effect, to move into this bigger issue of the North American Union, to merge Mexico, the United States, and Canada into one new country and carry on a change in title. But
just getting back to that point, we mentioned about this attack that's done on the individual who's basically persecuted, prosecuted, to the point that they feel that they're non-functioning, even to the extent that the individual may commit suicide.
Well, Gary Webb is a perfect example of that. He actually came out, and this goes to much of the stuff that's going on now, is I'm thinking it was San Jose is the area, but I think it was called the San Jose Examiner. I'm not sure the name of the paper, but you can Google it. And Gary Webb was a journalist. He came out and made the connection between the crack cocaine epidemic and the CIA and drug running, which tied into not only the Contras and Iran, and Reagan and all of this stuff that's been going on, and they went after him, destroyed his life to the point where allegedly he committed suicides, and there's rumors about, on the internet and stuff that, it was actually 2 shots, that somehow he survived the first shot and then, was well enough to take another shot at himself in the head and kill himself. And, even information on that should be open for public disclosure. I know there's issues of medical privacy and privilege, but at some point, especially on a murder, if things like that can be covered up and not allowed public access, then they can go ahead and, cover up a public execution. Look what happened with Kennedy. I mean, look at all the changes in, Bush himself came out, or not Bush, but Ford came out and supposedly...
Gerald Ford.
Right, President Gerald Ford and former Vice President, right. Came out and changed the location of one of the wounds in the official report. He's not a doctor. He has no right to do that. So
these are cover-ups, basically. And most people, if they've seen TV, if you've watched TV, you've seen this in crime stories and things of that nature. This is real. This is very real. This happens on a regular basis where things are being covered up and altered to fit their story that is going to hit the media. And a lot of people, they refuse to question the details or ask for further details.
Well, it goes into more complex issues like what's going on with the war in Iran, these false flag proceedings or these false flag events or incidents where they'll have like a Gulf of Tonkin incident, which most people know if they know their history didn't really happen. They use it as an excuse to escalate.
Well, it didn't happen the way they said it happened.
Well, I don't even think it actually really happened from what, there were no attacks.
Well, it occurred in that area of the Gulf of Tonkin, but whether that incident as represented, no.
Right, and it wasn't anything to escalate and bring it into, much like we've seen now with Britain, with the Marines or the naval forces in...
It's another example of it.
Right, and they use these just like even in Poland, where the Germans dressed up
in World War II.
Right, and used that to invade Poland. And they actually took prisoners, dressed them up in Polish uniforms, put them in a radio station, killed them, and said that, you know, that Poland had actually invaded Germany, when in reality it didn't. They actually set the whole thing up so as to have an excuse for a war.
Yeah, they actually had some of their own soldiers, the ones that were controllable, to do a lot of the
dirty work,
devastation part, and then they threw the bodies of prisoners, expendables once again,
right,
into uniforms, and they left those as collateral damage.
And then they just pump up. You've seen what happened with Iraq. The very same thing is going on with Iran right now, and many people are saying that they're going to launch here in the next couple of weeks.
So
real quick, let me get into this, because this goes into the criminal activity and what they're doing and why they're doing it. It goes towards money. They're stealing not only from federal officers and federal personnel, but military officers and military personnel, like stealing death benefits and more. But Johnstown...
If you could just reintroduce that article.
Well, this is how Specialist Town lost his benefits. And again, it was in The Nation, March 22nd, 2007. It was written by Joshua Kors, K-O-R-S, and it goes to much of the incidents of what are going on. But Johnstown has spent the last few years fighting two battles, one against his body, the other against the U.S. Army. Both began in October 2004 in Ramadi, Iraq. He was standing in the doorway of his battalion's headquarters when a 107-millimeter rocket struck 2 feet above his head. The impact punched a piano-sized hole in the concrete facade, sparked a huge fireball, and tossed a 25-year-old Army specialist to the floor, where he lay blacked out amongst the rubble. The next thing I remember, and this is Specialist Town speaking, the next thing I remember is waking up on the ground. Men from his unit had gathered around his body and were screaming his name. They started shaking me, but I was numb all over, he says. And it's weird because for a few minutes you feel like you're not really there. I could see them, but I couldn't hear them. I couldn't hear anything. I started shaking because I thought I was dead. And what's happened since then is that the military has come out and tried to claim that Specialist Town somehow has a personality disorder from birth, some type of a birth defect, so that they can discharge him from the military, not pay him a pension, not give him a proper medical discharge, not give him proper medical care, or better yet, keep him in the military, have him work in a desk, having him help other soldiers who are coming back, who are dealing with the very same thing, and keep him employed off the streets. And instead, now, when he was discharged and he was lied to, they did this to steal his pension, steal his medical benefits, you know, even to a large extent steal his death benefits and more. He has a debt to the military of $3,000, so he owes the United States military after he got blown up, and they've discharged him, and you guarantee, unless his family and or friends circle the wagons around this individual, he will end up out on the street and be, you know, another excuse to, and you saw what happened from Vietnam, is when the soldiers came back from Vietnam, they were chastised, treated as if, you know, it was their fault that the administration took us into another illegal war, as they've done now again. And what is going on? So people need to not only circle the wagons, but understand what a whistleblower complaint is, because we enshrine that within our Constitution. The right to seek redress and actually find redress is a constitutional right and protection. And it should be of any civilized society. Supposedly, we're in Iraq fighting for democracy.
Right, if you don't have it, then talk about it in someplace else.
And water it down here.
Exactly. On his situation, though, they're trying to make it appear as if he has some kind of culpability, just like insurance companies, where they don't have to pay
Risk management.
They don't have to pay you the full damages because they say, hey, you know what, you were in part
You were partially responsible.
You were partially responsible for that, then we're going to deduct the proceeds that you thought that you were going to get. We're going to deduct from that amount. So you're going to get less because you do assume partial responsibility in the situation. So in this case, because this is a volunteer army, right, a volunteer military, that in this case, he pretty much chose to be there, but everything else you're saying that he had other defects.
Well, no, but it's a contractual.
That create a situation that perhaps relieves the military of their full responsibility, where most young people going into the military are thinking, hey, once I'm in the military, I'm going to be taken care of.
But he has, well, there's contractual rights. I mean, he has certain rights and privileges.
But are these one-sided?
Well, they are to a very large degree. They're not intended to be that way. but there's individuals in the administration who are lying, cheating, and stealing from other American citizens, other American officers and personnel, not just in federal service, but even like the U.S. attorneys. Those 8 U.S. attorneys, they're trying to play off as if they don't have a property right or a property interest in those jobs, so that they can play the very same game through powers of eminent domain from the Kelo versus Connecticut decision to say that you, the American people, have no rights to your jobs, have no rights to your industry, have no rights to your technology, and therefore we're going to take it as the corporations and big government who are working for the corporations and even from the corporations and outsource it and sell it off to other people.
So it's very much privatization or corporate structure or model, the way it's handled, the way people are handled, more like spokes in the wheel instead of actually human life that deserves extra consideration and sensitivity, especially in this case where this specialist town, he's pretty much lost his hearing and he's damaged for life.
Well, and it's worse than that. Let me read this other part. Eventually, the rocket shrapnel was removed from Town's neck and his ear stopped leaking blood, but his hearing never really recovered, and in many ways, neither has his life. A soldier honored 12 times during his 7 years in uniform, Town has spent the last 3 struggling with deafness, memory failure, and depression. By September 2006, he and the Army agreed he was no longer combat ready. But real quick, but instead of sending Town to a medical board and discharging him because of his injuries, and he'd get pension and medical benefits and more, doctors at Fort Carson, Colorado did something strange. They claimed Town's wounds were actually caused by a personality disorder. So he was in there and had chosen somehow because of his personality disorder to get hit by a 107 millimeter rocket somehow. Town was then booted from the Army and told that under a personality disorder discharge, he would never receive disability or medical benefits. Town is not alone. A 6-month investigation has uncovered multiple cases in which soldiers wounded in Iraq are suspiciously diagnosed as having a personality disorder, then prevented from collecting benefits. The conditions of their discharge have infuriated many in the military community, including the injured soldiers and their families, veterans' rights groups, even military officials required to process these dismissals. They say the military is purposely misdiagnosing soldiers like Town, and that it's doing so for one reason: to cheat them out of a lifetime of disability and medical benefits, thereby saving billions in expenses. And that's what's going on. And I have personal experience with this myself, to where Homeland Security has come after me and is actually charging me, prosecuting me aggressively for the last 4 years for quote-unquote being depressed. And they're trying to create, and you have to remember, I went to a military academy, federal officer, naval officer, and more, so I understand what they're doing in the games that are played. I've tried to defend myself, but when you have the United States of America, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, U.S. Coast Guard coming after you, it's pretty hard to defend yourself. But in Specialist Town's instance, he's not an officer. He probably doesn't have the education or training. He doesn't know how corrupt the system is or has become. And they lied to him. They told him that don't worry about it, you're going to get your benefits, you're going to get your full-time medical care, just go ahead and sign off on this. And he went ahead and did what he was told, although it was carried out under fraudulent circumstances. And now they're having investigations, and this is widespread, not only in corporate service, but of course in federal, military, and even federal positions, like whether it be the U.S. Attorney's Office and more. From what I understand, even those U.S. attorneys are trying to play the same game with them and declare that they somehow have a personality disorder. When you look into it more, Bill Frist, his 2 corporations, medical corporations, HC and Columbia, he's tried to declare that anyone 4 years and older should have a mental exam, and then they can somehow use this as an excuse. Well, when you took this mental exam at 4 years old, something came up, we didn't discover it till now, we're going to go ahead and steal from you your medical benefits, your pension, any disability or anything else that you might have, and throw you out on the street. And if you can survive in the environment that we have created, well, good for you.
Right. Basically, it's like you're defective. And since you're defective, you're not entitled to the full benefits. And these rights that you would think as an American are alienable. That means that you no longer have access to them because you're a defective part of the system, and so we have ways of dealing with your type.
Well, that any grievant, and this goes into risk management, that any grievant, complainant, dissident, it's their fault that somehow you shot yourself. Everybody shot themselves in the foot somehow. That, you know, in the war in Iraq or in federal service, that somehow all of these people are a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, and that it's their fault for not getting out of the way of a 107mm round or missile or rocket that's coming at them, and that therefore, well, you don't get anything.
Yeah, it sounds totally ridiculous, but when you talked about savings, this money that is saved is then redirected towards other individuals' pockets.
Right, it's not actually going...
It doesn't go back to the coffers
the general fund or...
of the general funds of the American public that, you know, we benefit from it. No, this money is diverted and redirected to other sources that are beneficial to a few. Right. That we do not know of, that are the unspoken few.
Well, and it goes towards even theft of death benefits. You've seen the incident out here in LA where the two women were not only insuring the homeless, but then eventually got to the point of getting so greedy they started to kill them to collect their death benefits. Jack Abramoff was involved in the very same type of situation where he had set up life insurance death benefits for one of the two Indian tribes he was working with, and working, you know, each other against themselves, to where he had the death benefits paid out into his own private trust. There's government officials, corporate officials, judges, lawyers, and others who are doing this widespread, to the point, just like in Vietnam, when the body count went up, accountability went down. They're set, and they want to get us deep into Iran so that as the body count goes up, accountability goes down, and they can steal not only everything from Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran and other foreign countries, but also what they're doing here within the United States, to the point that they are so unscrupulous, do not care about other human beings or this country or this nation or our people, that they will do this just to steal the death benefits of these soldiers and federal officers.
So they're creating wealth, in essence. They're creating wealth for a few individuals that are benefiting at the higher ranks of this hierarchy that exists in the system. So this is something that, when we go back to the whistleblowers, which we were talking about, any exposure to the mainstream media, of course, that falls upon deaf ears.
Right.
It's not given the platform.
It's corporate owned and corporate controlled. I mean, GE, which is a large federal contractor, owns and controls NBC. CBS is owned and controlled by Westinghouse. Westinghouse and General Electric are almost synonymous. I mean, they compete with each other on many levels, and for federal contracts. And then ABC is owned by Disney.
So if you can't get the word out, it's like it never happened.
Exactly.
And so that's what they're doing to whistleblowers here in America. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this show. It is In the Zone. I'm your special guest host, Edward Preston, and I've been talking with Eric Shine, the producer and also co-host of the show, In the Zone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
So.